Hare Krishna Bhutale, Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi, Gauravani Prasahane, Nivase Sasanyavadi, Prasthini Bhutale. Om Agyan Kavirandasya, Jana Salakaya, Success Militanjena, Tasmai, Sri Gurave Nama, Sri Caitanya Manabhistam, Stapitam Jena Bhutale, Sayam Rupakadamayam Dadati Sa Padantikam. Mansakalpatrubhyascha, Kripa Sindhu Bhayevicha, Patitaram Pavinebhyo, Vaishnadevyo Namo Namah. Hare Krishna. Good morning. Mahaprabhu has met Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, and then Mahaprabhu was given a place to stay, as with the other devotees, and then soon after that, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya was with Mukunda Datta, who had come with Mahaprabhu, and he knew Mahaprabhu originally from Chattogram, or Chittagong, as it is called, and he lived in Navadvip, and he knew Mahaprabhu, and so the three of them were together, Mukunda Datta, Gopinath Acharya, and Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And this was after Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya had for the first time met Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who had relatively recently taken sannyas. So Gopinath Acharya, the next day Gopinath Acharya took Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to see the early rising of Lord Jagannath. Gopinath Acharya then took Mukunda Datta with him and went to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. And when they arrived, Sarvabhauma addressed Mukunda Datta as follows: "This sannyasi is very meek and humble by nature, and his person is very beautiful to see. Consequently, my affection for him increases." So he's humble, and I believe we read this last week, because he kept his brahmachari name, because the brahmachari in the Bharati Sampradaya has the name Chaitanya. So to this, Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya added one more question. He said, "From which sampradaya has he accepted the sannyas order, and what is his name?" Gopinath Acharya replied, "The Lord's name is Sri Krishna Chaitanya, and his sannyas preceptor is the greatly fortunate Keshava Bharati." And Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya said, "Sri Krishna is a very good name, but he belongs to the Bharati community, therefore he is a second-class sannyasi." So, even in, because what is sannyas, what we learned in the beginning of when Prabhupada first, because we didn't know what sannyas was, we'd never even heard the title before. When I started chanting in 1967 or 8. Prasadama, where were you then? Gujarat, I think. But there were no Indians in the United States, practically speaking, and no one was familiar with anything about the Indian culture. Now it's quite different. But what Prabhupada had told us, that sannyas means civilly civilly means according to your relationship with the society, you are dead. You're a civil dead person. You don't have anything to do with the outside world, and you've left the outside world, the material world, and your only interest is in advancing in spiritual life, and of course helping others advance in spiritual life. But yet, despite not having anything to do with the material world, there's always a conception that sticks to us. It's like if you have some, you buy a jar full of some kind of food. I don't know what the best example for the kind of food it is, but even when there's no more food left, there's still some of the fragrances there, often. So similarly, still this competition. This is the first class civilly dead person, second class third class civilly dead person. When someone's not supposed to identify with anything other than being an eternal servant of Krishna or a spirit soul. But still there's such a tendency for the material conception of life to linger. I was once giving a class in Delhi. I think I must have mentioned this to you before. And I was talking about, you're not your body. I can't remember the subject, but it came up to, you're not your body, etc., etc. You're not your body, you're not this, you're not that. And then I looked around the room, and because it was Delhi, so I said, everyone sort of looks somewhat the same. If you're a Punjabi, raise your hand. And like 90% of the people raised their hand. And I just laughed and I said, you fell into my trap. Because we're just talking about you're not your body, but who's a Punjabi? And everyone raises their hand. So there's such a tendency, such a strong, deeply embedded tendency to identify with the country of birth and with our family, etc. Although it's just passing through, we philosophically understand this, but our realizations, even if we are quite advanced, tends to be on the shallow side. Or if you're driving in your car and someone bangs into you, and then you get out angry and say, you hit me, but maybe he didn't hit you at all. His car hit your car and you were sitting there. But there's such a tendency to identify with the body, because as long as we can remember, practically speaking, we remember this is ourselves. We look in the mirror and say, that's me. I'm looking good today, bad today, looking older, looking this, looking that. I'm. So who can be realized enough? That realization really comes by the mercy of Krishna. Madhvacharya actually said this. You'll actually realize this when you need to, by the mercy of Krishna. But yet, we know that we must serve, and this is not because of the body, because the body wants to not serve but to enjoy, but it's actually the very nature of the soul. This is called the amrita, the actual activity of the Lord, the characteristic of the soul in the eternal realm. And what we're seeing now every day, even when we look ourselves in the mirror, or if we look outside at the people of the world, or the cars driving by, we're seeing the activities, or even just look around at the trees and we hear the birds, we hear the cars. So you can hear the cars. You can hear the birds. Prasadama, can you hear the trees? What are they saying? Prasadama, Caitanya Caritamrta. Some of them are saying that. Especially the Jagat trees are saying that. Prasadama is saying Hare Krishna. Sorry. You tell them later, okay? If Mataji says to chant Hare Krishna, will you chant Hare Krishna Rasanama? Yeah, I thought so. Good. So in any case, are you Gujarati? Or you're Australian? Or you're a spirit soul? Mataji, like every mother, you should be telling him the right answers. And he should bring you to all his examinations too. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya actually said that he's a second-class sannyasi. And Gopinath Acharya replied, Sri Krishna Caitanya Mahaprabhu does not rely on any external formalities. There is no need for him to accept the sannyas order from a superior sampradaya. Now, in Prabhupada's purport here, which is quite long, Prabhupada explains the different sampradayas and the names that they have and what their meanings are, and I found it very interesting. So I'll read at least a little of it, because they show the individuality of the soul, actually, because some sannyasis prefer to live in one place and some live in another. I'll read a little bit at least. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu accepted sannyas from the Bharati Sampradaya community, which belongs to the disciplic succession of Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya introduced names for his sannyasi disciples, and these are 10 in number. Out of these, the surnames Tirtha, Ashram, and Saraswati are considered topmost. In the monastery at Sringeri, the name Saraswati is considered first class, Bharati second class, and Puri third class. A sannyasi who has very nicely understood the slogan Tattvamasi, you are that, which is the Mahavakya, and this will come up quite soon. This is what Shankaracharya, Sripad Shankaracharya termed one of the Mahavakyas, the Vedic Mahavakyas, one of the great expressions where all the philosophy is contained within. That you are Soham, you are everything, you are that. And this is right above in Sringari Mat, right above the altar, not above the altar, but above the building housing the altar. They have in letters, big letters, Aham Brahmasmi. You're Brahman. I am Brahman. The living entity is Brahman. So Saraswati in Sringeri Mat is considered first class, Bharati second class, and Puri third class. A sannyasi who has very nicely understood the slogan Tattvamasi, and who takes his bath at the confluence of the rivers Ganges, Jamuna, and Saraswati is called the Tirtha. A person who is very eager to accept sannyas, who is detached from worldly activities, who has no desire for any kind of material facilities, and who is thus saved from repeated birth and death, is known as ashram. When a sannyasi lives in a beautiful solitary place in the forest and is freed from all material desires, he is called van. A sannyasi who always lives in the forest and renounces all connections with the world in order to be elevated to the heavenly planets, where he can live in the Nanda Kanana, is called Aranya. Aranya means forest. One who prefers living in the mountains, engaged in the study of the Bhagavad Gita, and whose intelligence is fixed, is called Giri. One who prefers living in great mountains, even amongst ferocious animals, to attain the summit, the topmost conclusions of philosophical speculation, understanding that the essence of the material world is useless. So even he preferred to live amongst ferocious animals. He is called Parvat, different kind of mountain. A sannyasi who has dipped into the ocean of the absolute truth and collected some valuable stones of knowledge from that ocean, who never falls from the regulative principles of a sannyasa, is called Sagar, ocean. One who has learned the classical art of music, who engages in its culture and who has become expert, completely aloof from material attachment, is called Saraswati. A sannyasi who is always engaged in music for spiritual elevation is called Saraswati. One who has become completely educated and is freed from all kinds of ignorance and who is never unhappy, even in a distressed condition, is called Bharati. And one who has become very expert in absolute knowledge, who is situated in the absolute truth, and who is always discusses the absolute truth, is called Puri. And then Srila Prabhupada discusses in his purport the brahmachari names for these persons, and Caitanya is the brahmachari name, one who is able to distinguish between matter and spirit, who is never disturbed by material transformations, and who meditates on the unlimited, inexhaustible, auspicious Brahman effulgence, is a first-class learned brahmachari, and his name Caitanya. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya liked the name Sri Krishna, but not the name Caitanya, because that indicated a lower class sampradaya or community. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, he said, after saying that, after Gopinathacharya replied that he didn't need to take sannyas at all from any kind of community, these are external, the Bhattacharya inquired about Caitanya Mahaprabhu in a different way, and he said, see, Caitanya Mahaprabhu is in his youth, his full-fledged youthful life, because he was about 24 years old. How can he keep the principles of sannyas? I shall continually recite Vedanta philosophy before Caitanya Mahaprabhu, so that he will remain fixed in renunciation and thus enter into the path of monism. Advaita Marg Pravesh, Vairagya, Advaita Marg Pravesh. So he will be completely renounced if he hears Vedanta Sunaiva Nirantara. Continuously, if he continuously hears Vedanta, then Vairagya, he will get complete detachment and Advaita Marg. He will understand the philosophy properly and enter into the path of Sripad Shankaracharya of impersonalism. He will enter that Pravesh. So there's a purport on this. We shall move on though. So this way he was thinking with affection, inaccurately, but with affection, of helping Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu. And then Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya suggested, if Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu would like, I could bring him into a first-class sampradaya by offering him saffron cloth and performing the reformatory processes again. So he's saying, I will reinitiate him and elevate him into the Saraswati Sampradaya. And Gopinathacharya, the Bengali Shuni, hearing this, Gopinath Mukunda Duhe Dukkha Haila, they were immediately very unhappy. And Gopinathacharya Kichu Kohite Lagila. So it hit him to speak. It inspired him. Gopinathacharya couldn't contain himself. And he said, after Gopinathacharya and Mukunda Datta became very unhappy when they heard this, and Gopinathacharya therefore addressed Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, saying, my dear Bhattacharya, you do not know the greatness of Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu. All the symptoms of the Supreme Personality of Godhead are found in him to the highest degree. Gopinathacharya continued, Lord Caitanya Mahaprabhu is celebrated. He is known as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, there were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of devotees who accepted him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The first biography of Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu was written, I think it was called the Caitanya Caritamrta, written by Murari Gupta. one of the associates of Mahaprabhu while he was growing up. He had so much to do with Mahaprabhu when he was growing up, and he witnessed all the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip. Vrindavan Das Thakur, the author of Chaitanya Bhagavata, he wasn't a witness because he was born 4 years before Mahaprabhu left. So he was just a baby to take sannyas, before Mahaprabhu left to take sannyas. But Murari Gupta, he saw the boring Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accept the form of a boar, and Varahadev. He saw so many miraculous things, and he put them in the book Caitanya Caritamrta, and all the devotees in Navadvip and other places, they all accepted Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Lord. So Gopinath Acharya continued. He's celebrated as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Parama Ishvara. Those who are ignorant in this connection find the conclusion of knowledgeable men very difficult to understand. So he said, Agyastani, those who are situated in ignorance, can't understand this. So he's speaking to just a little bit indirectly, saying that to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya is saying those, like some people, are situated in ignorance. I wasn't pointing at you. What did you? Don't worry. So Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, or the disciples of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, they retaliated because he had insulted their Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, saying that he was ignorant. So his disciples, and he had many, many, many disciples. He was the Rajki Pandit. He was the leading scholar in all of Jagannath Puri, and the king's own scholar and personal Pandit. So they retaliated. By what evidence do you conclude that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the Supreme Lord? On what authority? Anyone could say that someone is the Supreme Lord, this one's the Supreme Lord, that one's the Supreme Lord. But on what evidence? What is the pramana by which you can assert this with such conviction? And Gopinath Acharya replied, the statements of authorized acharyas who understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, they are the proof. Ishvara Lakshane. Here is Prabhupada's purport. Since the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there have been many pseudo-fake incarnations in India who do not present authorized evidence. 500 years ago, the disciples of Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, being very learned scholars, were certainly right in asking Gopinath Acharya for evidence. Praman. If a person proposes that he himself is God, or that someone else is an incarnation of God, or God himself, he must cite evidence from Shastra to prove his claim. Thus the request of the Bhattacharya's disciple is quite bona fide, it's quite legitimate, it's the proper thing. Unfortunately, at the present moment, it has become fashionable to present someone as an incarnation of God without referring to the Shastra. So this was, Prabhupada had to confront this when he started his preaching. There were a few people at that time claiming that they were God, people, yogis from India, etc. And there was once when Prabhupada was in Hong Kong, and there was a press conference, and there was one of those so-called incarnations who had quite a big following at that time. His name was Bal Krishna Yogeshwar. Did you ever hear of him? Or you just read about it? Yeah. And but they used to call him Guru Maharajji. So I don't think Prabhupada liked that very much, but he was saying that he was God, and so sometimes devotees would confront his followers and say, if he's God, is he shown the universal form? And the followers of this Guru Maharajji would say, only if you surrender, then he'll show it to you. So just silly things like that. So at this press conference, the reporter asked Prabhupada, because reporters, they need to sell newspapers. In those days they needed to sell newspapers, now they need clicks. But in those days they needed to sell newspapers, and what sells newspapers is violence and murder and conflict. So the reporter asked Prabhupada, looking for a story that would fit in his newspaper, because it was a press conference, said, what do you think about Guru Maharajji? So Prabhupada he had different moods, but he tended to be very, very straightforward. But he would do it in a very clever way. So Prabhupada answered first, no, don't ask us about Guru Maharajji. If you have something to ask us about Krishna consciousness, then we'll answer. But the reporter was sensing that there was some tension there, and there might be a good story there. So he had, no, please tell us what you think about Guru Maharajji. So no, again, a second time he said, no, don't tell us, ask us about this. If you want to know, I'm here to speak about Krishna consciousness. If you have any question about Krishna, and when he asked the third time, Prabhupada, for his own reasons, decided to answer. So I think first he said he was a dog. And the reporter was so happy, because when you get one spiritual teacher calling another so-called spiritual teacher a dog, it's going to maybe sell newspapers. So, and actually the story that the reporter read got picked up by, it was in Time magazine even. It was so it was so good that Prabhupada called him a dog, and then Prabhupada wasn't satisfied with that, then he called him a cheater. A dog and a cheater. And he said, but Krishna is the greatest cheater, so he will become cheated by Krishna. And the reporter, in those days people actually wrote with their pencils or pens in their hands on paper, so old-fashioned, but somehow or another it worked. So very soon after that, this Guru Maharajji fellow, he had a very pretty, very, very pretty secretary who was a Westerner, and I think his family was from Rishikesh or Hardwar, Rishikesh, I believe, and he married his secretary, this pretty Western lady, and his mother got so upset with him, because you're not allowed to do that. What to speak of it being a love marriage? Even if you're God, you're not allowed to do that when your mother doesn't like it. So she rejected him and said he's not God anymore. Maybe not so in a funny way like that, but she was propagating him like that. He's not God. He married this Videshi, how could he be God? And then he lost all his following, and then he's still quite wealthy though. But he gave up the Vedic culture type of thing. He dresses in a suit and things like that. But anyway, so the question is, well, why do you think he's God? Where's the proof? Where's the pramana? And the Bhattacharya's disciples continued saying, we derive knowledge of the absolute truth by logical hypothesis. Anumane means by logic or inference. Nahi Ishvara Gyan, otherwise you can't understand Ishvara Gyan, knowledge of the absolute truth. And Gopinath Acharya replied, one cannot attain real knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead by such logical hypothesis and argument. You can't, just by the processes of your own brain, by anuman, by inference, you can't actually understand the absolute truth. You can understand it to some degree, but you can't understand the full manifestation of the absolute truth, because logic is limited by one's own intelligence. If it comes from one's intelligence, it's an ascending process. You start with something and you infer that this is true. So, for instance, but you can't tell everything by logic. You can tell certain things, you can understand certain things, but not everything. And if you find out certain things and you accept that as everything, that's false. That's a problem. For instance, say if you buy some basmati rice, and where is basmati rice usually from? Pakistan or? India. That's good. Safe answer. Where? Punjab, of course. So you were just getting rid of the flies, yes? Usually anyone who tries to get rid of a fly we will call on. So you have to be careful. So say you buy some rice. So you can see, you look at the package, and you see it's from Pakistan or Punjab or something, and you can say you're trying to understand the source of this rice. So you look at it and you say, there's a farmer somewhere who's planted rice, and there's a lot of water, and they've planted rice, and it grew green, and then at some point they took it out and they threshed it, and then they sold it to some person, and they packed it, and you can understand something about the process of the rice, but what can you understand about the person who was the farmer? Using that kind of inference with limited knowledge, what can you understand about the person who is that farmer? What he looks like, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, how many children he has, what his family is, who his friends are, what his children's names are, and things like that. The way to understand the personality is completely different from the general logical, what one can attain from anuman or logical inference. But the one way to understand that is if that person, that farmer, he says, I am like this, I'm like that, I have 3 children, one is named Rajesh, the other is named Sunita. What's the third common Punjabi name? Manpreet, Kulpreet, Kapoor. I am Kapoor. And he says, and I'm such and such years old, and I look like this. If he tells you what he's like, or someone who knows him closely tells you what he's like and what his personality is like, then one can understand. So one is an ascending process by logic, and the process of actually understanding the more intimate aspects about the person is a descending process. It descends from the person himself and those who know that person. So if one wants to understand the personality of Godhead, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, then one has to be a very trusted person, because you can understand. Maybe that farmer Kulprit will tell you that I have 2 children and their names are this and that. But if you ask him, how much money do you have in your bank? bank account. He won't tell you, but he'll tell only the person who he completely trusts. And who does he completely trust? Someone who he knows, proven, loves him under all circumstances and won't use that information against him and cheat him. The information won't be used for one's own benefit. It's confidential. So knowledge of Krishna's personality is the most confidential knowledge. Is knowledge of Krishna in Brajadam. And that one has to get through the most trusted, loving personalities. Those who have really proven themselves by their devotion and proven that's what they really, really are trustworthy because of their love. And then Krishna will reveal the Dami Buddhi Yogam Tam Yena Mamu Bhyantite. What's the beginning of that verse? Tesham Satata Yuktanam Bhajatam Priti Purvakam. You know that verse? You can say it? Let's hear. Very nice. Thank you so much. But with priti, if one is doing one's bhajan with great affection and devotion, priti purvakam, then Krishna will reveal the Dami Buddhi Yogam Tam. He'll tell you just what you need to get to him. And all about him, himself. So it's not that there's a lack of knowledge. There's the lack tends to be on our side, and that's the lack is of devotion, proven, fixed devotion. So Prabhupada in the purport explains the Mayavadi's thinking. They can understand, they can conclude by inference, by logic, that a higher power has created the cosmic manifestation, he says. They can understand that everything has a cause, so there must be some cause of the material world. But they do not accept this great power to be a person. They do not accept this great power to be a person. They can't understand the person behind it all by their logic. Their brains cannot accommodate the fact that this huge cosmic manifestation can be created by a person. They doubt this because as soon as they think of a person, they think of a person within the material world with limited potency. Sometimes the Mayavadi philosophers will accept Lord Krishna or Lord Rama as Bhagavan, but they think of the Lord as a person having a material body. The Mayavadis do not understand that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has a spiritual body. So that defines Mayavad philosophy. They say that when the one Brahman comes into the material world, when he's influenced by Sattva-gun, the mode of goodness, he becomes Ishvara, the mode of goodness, the material mode of goodness. And when that one Brahman comes into the material world influenced by Rajagun and Tamagun, ignorance, passion and ignorance, then he becomes Jiva. And they say also that the process of devotional service is under the modes of material nature, and the descriptions of the spiritual world are all under the modes of material nature. And Srila Jiva Goswami in the Sandarbhas, he just proves these things by Shastra that it's not the case. That Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachidananda Vigraha, and that every element of the spiritual world, Vaikuntha, is eternal and spiritual. So if one uses one's limited intelligence to understand something, one may be able to understand something, but if we think that something is that we've understood is the complete knowledge of that thing, then we are incorrect. And the complete knowledge of anything, whether it's the materials of the table, or the materials of the chair, or the materials of the microphone stand, complete knowledge of it is in its relationship with Krishna. If one understands it separate from Krishna, one's knowledge is not complete. Because everything in existence has a relationship with Krishna, including the elements of this world and including ourselves. That we have a relationship with Krishna. And if we turn to that relationship with Krishna and act in relationship with Krishna in that way, then we are in our natural constitutional position. Jivera Surupoi Krishna Nityadas. Do you know that one? That verse? Jivera Surupoi? No. Maybe you'll know it by next week, I don't know. It's a very important verse. It's knowledge that tells us who we are. Because when we ask ourselves, who am I actually? Well, why don't you ask yourself, I mean, not inside, not outside, just ask yourself, well, who actually am I? What do you come up with? Who is the consciousness that responds to that question? Is that person, that entity who responds to that question, is that my body? Or is it my mind that's always changing? Or is it my intelligent reasoning? Or is it something still deeper, more subtle? And the answer that Mahaprabhu gives is that the living entity is Krishna's servant. That's who we are. Eternally, Nitya. We're eternally Krishna's servant. And Krishna in our heart is waiting for us to turn to Him. What do you think about that? What do you think? Excuse me? You like that philosophy? So Prabhupada, a lot of the purports will be technical here, and we won't read them all. And Gopinath Acharya continued. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead only by His mercy. Anuman Praman Nahi Ishvara Tattva Gyan. By Anuman, by logic, you cannot understand Ishvara Tattva Gyan. You cannot understand actually who the Ishvara is. Kripa Vina, without mercy, Ishvara Keha Nahi Jana, you cannot understand. Because He won't reveal to you. So sometimes devotees will ask, well, naturally we all pray for mercy, and we all pray for blessings. But more than the question of will you give me blessings is what can I do to attract your mercy and blessings, dear Lord? How should I act? So therefore, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur would say, and Prabhupada would also cite Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, saying, don't try and see Krishna because you won't be able to do it. He didn't say that part, that's my comment. Don't try and see Krishna, but act in such a way that Krishna will see you. So that puts all the pressure on us as opposed to please give me blessings, please give me blessings, please give me blessings. Puts the pressure on us to act in such a way that Krishna will give us blessings and give us mercy. And what will cause us to act in such a way? That's a question. What do you think? Raise your hand if you'd like to answer. What would be the cause? Yes, take your time.
A devotional service, a devotional attitude towards Him.
So having a devotional attitude. And how will that make you naturally, so that will attract His mercy. So what does that mean, having a devotional attitude?
It means enjoying what you're doing for Krishna, doing it with consciousness, care.
For the purpose of?
Pleasing Krishna and His devotees.
Okay. So acting for Krishna's pleasure. And being happy doing it too, as you pointed out. Not I'll try and please Krishna, all right, it's not fun, but I'll do it anyway because otherwise I won't get any mercy. So that might not be exactly the way to attract mercy. Anyone else would like to say what would attract Krishna's mercy? I think. Yes.
If you have love and attachment, which comes from hearing.
Love and attachment, which comes from hearing. Anyone else? Thank you. Yes. Bhakti. Say more. What does that mean to you? Yes. So what do you mean by bhakti? So serving is the same as bhakti? What's the difference between serving and seva? Bhakti. Serving, because sometimes you have in India, as you know, if you have a job, or people ask you, what service do you do? What is your service? Meaning, what job do you have? But that's not bhakti. But devotional service, it's filled with the desire to please the other. And that's actually rare in this world because everyone in this world is selfish, because that's what false ego does. It makes us think of ourselves first. So, and therefore everyone is very lonely. So if we understand we are like that, then we take steps forward by doing things even though it's not perfect, but starting the relationship. And Krishna reciprocates and appreciates that so much. Just like do you remember what the first words Brother Sudama said? Yeah. Are you going to reveal it?
I think it's mother.
Of course. Yes. And do you remember the first sentence either of the children said? No. But you could. What language was it in, do you think? Gujarati. But it wasn't grammatically correct, I'm sure. Ball, give, something like that, maybe something like that. So when Krishna sees us making an attempt, just as the parents are so happy even with the imperfect attempt of the children to speak or walk, so similarly Krishna, even though we don't have so much bhakti, he's just pleased with the steps that we take forward. We'll just read one last, no. We'll continue with 83 next week, Krishna willing. Thank you. Any questions or comments? How much mercy do you think you need to know Krishna? Do you know? A lot or a little? Huh? But a lot for us is a little for Krishna. So even if he gives us a little mercy, that's what the next verses are about. Even if he gives us a little mercy, that's sufficient. And it's said that even a drop of mercy from Krishna is enough to drown the entire world in mercy. Any questions? Yes.
Just a comment, and also like with Prabhupada, they told us that 1 minute's association with a pure devotee is so much mercy.
Why?
Because they're Krishna conscious. They're always with Krishna.
But why does that's them? But how does that give you mercy?
Because you come into contact with that energy yourself and you feel it.
Even if you don't feel it, it has its effect. Something comes into the consciousness. Because otherwise we're stuck just in the bubble of material consciousness. So there has to be an entrance of the spiritual into our consciousness. Something of transcendence has to enter into the material bubble of our consciousness. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes. You get more mercy than pleasing Krishna.
You said about all of the mercy you get from I understand you meet a pure devotee and the transfer of faith, and that is the biggest mercy you get.
Because Shraddha in Bhakti Sandarbha, I think it's one of the definitions of what the Bhakti Lata Bij is. Because faith is not of this world. It's an energy. It's bhakti. It's the doorway to bhakti. Yes. And even if that contact comes in the form of a doubt, it's still very powerful. The doubt could be, could this really be true? And that's also, it's doubting one's own perception of reality. So pleasing the Lord's devotees is a very good way of pleasing Him. say the best way we could say. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? You had a question? Yeah, I thought at one point you raised your hand. Oh, that was...
I think you had asked something previously.
What was that?
Association. I can't remember the question.
What was it? You can remember the answer, though. Okay, what was the answer?
Association of devotees. I think the question was how do you get company? Like how do you attract devotees? I said association and service to devotees.
Association and service to devotees attracts mercy. Yeah.
The biggest difficulty I find is not being selfish.
The most difficulty is a personal statement. It's not being selfish.
In so many ways, it slips into very insidious ways. It slips into
thinking and acting. At least some percentage I want. Something I want from it. Even if it's only 0.2%, at least I should get something. Especially when you're dealing with Krishna's money. It's passing through your hands. And there's such a tendency for something to get stuck some money to get stuck when it passes through one's hands. And all things, though. At least something I should get, at least a little fame, or at least some people will say, "Oh, you're doing such a good job of serving. You're such a good devotee." At least something I should get. So I'm agreeing with your point. So then the question is, what removes selfishness?
I have a follow-up on that.
But I asked you first. What removes selfishness?
The courage to...
No. You started with the courage, and I said no. It's devotion, love. When that causes one to act for another. It's the source of all courage. I once saw it at Govardhan. I once saw that there was one mother who wasn't very old, and she had a daughter who was about Navkishori's age, and the daughter had a bag of monkeys. No, she had a bag of bananas that was soon going to be a bag of monkeys. And this huge monkey came over, one of those, the only way I always describe them is the ones who look like they've been to the gym. And they walk over like that. And they're very heavy and ferocious. And tried to grab the bananas from the young girl, and the mother, she was 100 times more ferocious than she gave her courage. She didn't think, because she loves her child so much. So naturally, she just went over and that big monkey, Bandara, he understood. I have to leave immediately. Otherwise, this is a very dangerous situation. An angry mother, anything can happen. She might bite me. And immediately ran away. So I say it's love. And love will give you courage. Okay, we'll end here. Last, but certainly not least.
I did have a point that, like when you're getting older, is it selfish to then you have to protect yourself from, overextending yourself? You have to.
Well, it depends on what you're saying. Is that selfish or is that bhakti? It depends who you think yourself is. If you think you conceive of yourself as a servant of Krishna, it's certainly not selfish. It's practical. You have to do that in Krishna's service. So, therefore, in Shastra says that performing one's daily duties is not against pure devotional service. To maintain one's health, but really, one has to. Depends how deep one's concept of self is, because we can also use anything as an excuse. But so you can always check with someone who you trust. It's too far or not. Okay, we shall end. Thank you very much. See Caitanya Caritamrta ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhaktivinoda ki jai.